All right, people, we finally made it. We've been hinting at it all season. This is another one of the big ones, if not one of the biggest ones. I still remember when this came out back in, I want to say it was either May of 2016. It's time for the Battle of the Bastards. On one side, Jon Snow, relative good guy, recently returned from the dead, kind of being just led around by everyone now. And on the other side, Ramsay Bolton, recently christened as a legitimized person, has killed every single one of his allies, has the larger army, and is currently shooting some arrows. Pat, who you have odds on in this fight?
Hey, listen, all I know is that I think the Talkin TV family and the, that are Talkin Thrones with us are definitely on Jon Snow's side. But the fact of the matter is, when they're watching this episode, this summer blockbuster battle sequence, right? They're probably doing a little battle of the summer custards, trying a couple different desserts, right? As you enjoy Game of Thrones.
Well, I mean, anybody who's actually able to keep their stomachs during this battle sequence, I commend them for it, is all that I'm going to say. All of that and more on today's episode of Talkin Thrones. All right, Pat, we finally reached it. Like I said, it's another penultimate episode. I always try to make a big deal whenever we get a penultimate episode, but I think it's safe to say that this is the penultimate to end all penultimates. This is building off of, again, Baelor, Ned Stark lost his head. Blackwater, the Battle of the Blackwater. Reigns of Castamere, the Red Wedding. Watchers on the Wall, Battle of the Wall. Dance of Dragons, we got both Shireen Baratheon's death as well as the Dragon Pit sequence at the end of the episode, along with a couple of other ancillary things. It ultimately really didn't matter that much. But so you have this interesting thing where the Battle of the Bastards is kind of building off of a series of penultimate episodes where, again, the penultimate is usually where like the big major thing happens, whether it's a series of events that build up to one crazy shocking twist or a major action set piece episode. And it's an even season, which means we were definitely gearing up for an action set piece episode. And oh man, did we get the action set piece to end all action set pieces here. This is Miguel Sapochnik coming back after Hardhome last season and showed, oh, you thought that Hardhome that was crazy. Hold my beer,
Yeah. Hey, listen, it basically, I understand. Meereen is one of the best action sequences we're ever going to get. I was talking about it last week, right? Man. Last episode. So, that is really where the center of this one
absolutely.
takes place.
It's only the title of the episode. And yes, that's absolutely, we were going to get Meereen. Obviously, it was kind of interesting because it's like, I mean, going in, right, they were kind of, I still remember the promos for this episode, the week before, when they were airing it, they were, I'm pretty sure they only showed footage from Winterfell, from the Battle of Winterfell. You only saw the field. You saw like the various rows of burning men on the cross, on the Bolton sigils that you see on the field. They didn't show anything of Meereen, so you can imagine to my surprise when not only did we get, obviously, the titular Battle of the Bastards here, but you also got, the wrap-up of the Meereen sequence, which was, I mean, I'm not going to say it redeems Meereen, but it was definitely a very, very refreshing end to a very tiresome storyline.
It's the best part of Meereen this season. It wraps up the storyline, which was sort of hit and miss, mostly miss. They didn't really set things up. It kind of was like Varys and Tyrion walking around town. Oh, this ain't good. Let's change things up. Okay, it's not like a great scene,
Yeah.
Sure, there's some banter back and forth, but this banter is, far worse than the Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not like they brought James Gunn and his team in to, hype it up. They didn't do a cleanup on the dialogue. It was basically just, hey, there's some red priests in town. Ain't that something?
It's like, oh man, what are we gonna do about the Masters? Oh, let's invite them in for tea and crumpets and make a deal with them and totally expect them to hold up their end of the bargain. Look, it's no secret. I've made my thoughts on this entire storyline clear from the minute that we started this. How I was very kind of angry that they kind of took Tyrion, who was previously one of the smartest characters on the entire show, and kind of dumbed him down to just like essentially this mouthpiece in order to deliver some more terrible jokes and just make some really obvious mistakes that were kind of just emblematic of the fact that they were kind of spinning their wheels until they could have Daenerys show up. for, and with the dragons. And obviously, again, it's the big thing is that it's the warm up for what we're going to get in the next 2 seasons, where this is the first time we finally, after years upon years of watching these dragons grow and progressively get bigger and more dangerous, we finally get to see them fully grown and in action here. And boy, does it not disappoint.
Okay, Dom, before we get to the action sequence, why are they listening to Daenerys now? Like,
no, even better.
Did we skip that storyline? Because I'm lost.
Not even just that. It's like, so she shows up for the first time in however long it's been since she left in Meereen. She's talking to Tyrion. I mean, it's kind of funny how it's like Tyrion seriously thinks that he's trying to talk his way out of this one. And what's even more ludicrous is that we're fully expected to believe that Daenerys is just going to go along with it, where he's like, despite appearances, the city is on the rise. And it's so ridiculous and baffling, where it's like, the city is on the rise. And he's like, yes, all the people are chanting your name. They're all for, the good name of Daenerys. It's the slavers. They're ruining it. It's their whole thing.
I think he's a talker, right? So that's one of the best parts. Is he making an argument that sounds good enough, although it's like, why would there be a
lot of
war?
Holes in it. It's got a lot.
Yeah, well, his argument is essentially like, hey, the reason why the masses are attacking is because you're doing so well in Meereen. You're changing the economics of the area, so therefore they need to go to war. And hey, listen, he's making a great argument. From Daenerys' point of view, it's like, okay, it doesn't even matter if that's true or not. She wants to win, right? She's a conqueror. She's the
that
queen.
Is kind of her being back with the Dothraki has kind of reestablished that for her.
Exactly. So this is not one of those things that she wants to hear. And last week you were talking about the fact that Varys. It would have been cool, like fantasy booking, that if he was sort of, had something to do with the Sons of the Harpies and was really testing Daenerys to see if she was kind of a smart ruler, like they all expected her to be. And obviously, this whole storyline of Meereen is her failing the test,
right?
And then going forward, it's about Varys and Tyrion taking that knowledge and figuring out how to guide her, maybe into a better
direction. Adding a little bit more intrigue and underlying tension to the story.
Yeah, so that would have been
in the beginning.
That would have been really cool, because like here would be a moment where, let's say last episode in your fantasy booking of the show, Tyrion found out that Varys was doing this, and then here it is, he's in this meeting and he's sort of giving this detail, like the economy is good and like the reason why they're attacking is this, and he's giving out a detailed plan, and she says, the hell with it, I'm going to grab my dragons and burn everybody.
Right.
Then it's sort of like now Tyrion has to kind of second guess himself in what he believes. So obviously the show didn't go in that direction. And again, we're sort of jumping in and sort of trying to add like novel-like plot lines to a TV show. And I think, ultimately at the end of the day, since this is a show, we're going to have to just enjoy the action that we get. Although I will say it's the only reason why the dragons pay attention to her is because she lit a house on fire and was inside. Right. So like now the dragons, I guess, feel the fire energy that's around her.
I guess, like, I don't know. It's a little bit confusing there. I mean,
every couple months she's going to have to burn the house
I'm just
down.
chalking that up to the fact that they were just like, in their adolescent teen rebellion phase, and now that they're kind of more fully grown and slightly more mature, that they're like, now they're going to be like her engines of destruction. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I'm really
but that's us, the viewers, basically observing what we've seen and coming up with something. I kind of wish the storytellers here would give us a little bit of like what was with the dragons. What is that? What it is? They were adolescent, because they seem to just drop it, immediately and just go back to loving Daenerys the way that they used to.
Right.
So it's kind of like weird plot device that kind of they just are wishy-washy about and drop it when they don't need it anymore.
I also think it's still really weird where it's like, okay, where are Grey Worm and Missandei in that whole sequence with where were they in the room when Daenerys first landed and they're just magically gone? And I'm like, I feel like the two of them as being Daenerys' two most trusted advisors who are really only left. Like I said, Jorah's gone, Dario's still leading the hordes, Barristan's dead. Like, as their two most trusted advisors, I know it's still an active war zone, but it's like how they're not going to say anything about how it's like, yeah, it wasn't quite all peaches and cream when Tyrion was running things here. He did a couple of like no mention of him making the deal with the Masters in the first place. Like, none of that.
I think ultimately this is the the meeting where it's like, I need to see you in private.
Yeah.
And Daenerys basically was putting him in his place, So yeah. I think any conversation between Grey Worm and Missandei probably happened off camera before this sequence even took place.
I had another note here as well, which is where I'm like, okay, so he doesn't want Daenerys to burn down everything. Obviously, again, more of the, more leading into the whole, Tyrion being wary of her sub-arc, even though, again, that really doesn't happen until just literally the last season, because he's pretty much supporting her for all of the next season, But so the plan that he comes up with, though, is to only burn down the one ship in their fleet so that they can take the rest of the fleet. Why is it that Tyrion has to come up with that when Daenerys saw that the fleet was... I mean, she flew in on the dragon, and the whole thing that's established that in the first episode, the fleet was burned down. There was a whole impetus as to why they couldn't sail to Westeros as soon as she got back, was because their fleet that they originally had was gone. So the whole thing is they're like, oh, okay, so rather than burn down the whole fleet, it's logistically makes sense that they could just take the slave masters' fleets and sail to Westeros with them, But why is it Tyrion that has to come up with that, Especially because that's inconsistent with his character, because we clearly just spent this entire last season destroying his character and turning him into an inexplicable moron out of nowhere, So now Tyrion's going to be the one to magically come up with this plan,
Well, I think, I don't think they intentionally tried to destroy Tyrion.
Clearly not, but...
I think they accidentally did that by being... too sparse with the scenes in Meereen, or at least in terms of, Tyrion taking some action and doing something. Like, he met with the masters, he taught, or did he teach Missandei and Grey Worm to tell jokes, or they just had an awkward wine drinking session?
I don't know. The less said about that, the better.
Like Varys and him walked around the city saying, this place could actually, if we dressed it up, it would be nice. Like, not much happened this season.
There really wasn't that. But like I said, this is why I think this storyline, like I said, as far like the kind of the crux and the wrap up on the storyline, I think this is why this storyline infuriates me more than Dorne, because at the very least, I mean, again, like obviously, clearly they could have done way more with Dorne, but at the very least, Dorne, it felt like that was in a setup season, so it felt like they were like actually setting up for something really cool. And it's like here, it's like, no, we're literally just spinning our wheels. There's like no tension at all. There's no attacks from the Sons of the Harpy the entire season until magically they start attacking everyone out of the blue. There's no active siege. There's literally no tension. It's literally just, oh, how do we restore power to Meereen? So just if we're taking the storyline at its base core elements, that's boring to begin with. That's why there was no underlying tension. It's why it made 100%. All the tension that they put into this feel so manufactured.
Yeah, I think one of the things is that most of the scenes this season that we've got are dialogue scenes. They're, scenes like the joke telling and drinking of the wine, where they're kind of hiding the exposition amongst like this kind of clever scene of like, oh, Missandei and Grey Worm are former slaves and they don't necessarily joke around that much. Are they capable of telling jokes? And, to a certain degree they are. They kind of loosen up, and we get like a cool vibe from these characters that are fan favorites. But they're obviously peppering in the rest of the story about Meereen through their dialogue and through sort of, the lines of what the scene's about. The scene itself of them telling jokes is not really that interesting. It's clearly, lets us enjoy Missandei and Grey Worm and kind of see their growing relationship. But ultimately, it doesn't really do much, in terms of the intrigue, like you said, of the city. And I feel like that's a lot of the sequences that we've seen throughout this season is just like, things are happening and there's dialogue and we're talking about it. But then we cut to other places in the Game of Thrones universe that are far more important. And we really don't get the time that we want with Meereen. That is until this particular episode where action starts picking up and, let's just quote that one song, let the bodies, hit
Let the
that
bodies
floor.
hit the floor. Well, again, it just comes down to, again, my consistent problem with Benioff and Weiss and the kind of the approach that they took to the writing of the show since season 5. And we get to consistently bring them up because they are the ones that write a majority of the episodes per season. Really, I mean, it had always been the case, but really starting this season, it's like, other than Brian Cogman and the new writer that they brought on, Dave Hale, last season, they write a majority of the episodes. And it just consistently annoys me when it feels like all of the great writing that they put into the show in the first 4 seasons can really only be found in these very sparse episodes. Usually the premieres, the penultimates, the finales, maybe an episode or 2 here or there. It picked up a little bit this season. We'll see, obviously, once we hit the next season with the reduced episode count, but I don't know. It's just, that's the thing that consistently disappoints me because I know that they're capable of better writing, and it just becomes clear that it's like, yeah, obviously it's beyond talked about the fact that they were considering the other deals that they were getting from those other big studios and that they just had completely forgotten and stopped caring about the show. And I know people talk about that a lot with the last 2 seasons, but I feel like that really, really started with this season in particular, and it's one of the reasons why, in hindsight, despite the fact that season 6 still is like much, much better than I thought it was going to be going in, with the second half of the show, it's still, among many other things, doesn't hold a candlelight to the show. Because, I mean, just for me personally, I've never really fallen into the camp of, action and spectacle doesn't have its place in storytelling. Not at all. But I definitely have come around as far as it's like, yeah, action and spectacle as substitution for good writing, good drama, good characterization, rather than being another element of that. I think is something that I have very, very much lost my taste for, whereas I definitely had more of a tolerance for it beforehand.
Well, I think, obviously the first half of the show is loaded with story. And when we get to this season, there's multiple reasons that it kind of, there's just more characters in the world. The focus, shifts all around to different locations. And in this case, of Meereen, I think this season they just streamlined it, right? Because mainly we just need to wrap up Meereen so that she sails to Westeros. That's going to be the focus going forward in season 7 and 8. And I think they just minimized the screen time. They did, sort of the bare minimum to get through this storyline. And they ended off with, a pretty awesome conclusion. They just didn't really build up towards it. They kind of just let it simmer and then, here's this major sequence. We're wrapping it up. We're moving on to the next phase of Daenerys. And we can argue like why they did that, but I think mainly it's because they wanted to focus on other storylines this season and really just sort of, allow this to play out, given it minimum screen time, have a nice little finale, battle sequence. And then, Daenerys is going to come back strong in the next 2 seasons as a major character. We're finally going to see how she interacts with Westeros. And that's really what the audience wants. The other reason that, really could have happened is at this point, right? We've talked about it. There's no source material for the books.
Right. And obviously we know this too. Like I said, George R. R. Martin had obviously consulted them with different plot lines and outlines that he had for this sect of the show and for this sect of the story. But it was beyond obvious that even at this point, like George R. R. Martin had officially cashed in on the Game of Thrones IP stock. Like he'd put in the work. You could tell that he was very, very heavily involved with the first 4 seasons. That much had really, was very, very prevalent and apparent. He wrote an episode for each season going of the first 4 seasons. Then obviously comes season 5, he took a step back. He was focusing on a lot of prequel novels, and that was, I think, kind of why it was such a big obvious step. Kind of such a step down in quality wise. And this season, again, it's just the continuation of it where, again, this is kind of no longer Martin's world. I've talked in the past about kind of there being a distinct difference between Martin's Game of Thrones and Benioff and Weiss's Game of Thrones. And I think the reason why I talk about the first 4 seasons of the show versus these last 4 is that, it's also the fact that, I mean, it's obviously what happens with every time you have a creator who just gets this much massive amount of wealth. They really just want to keep making things that are going to be among this IP so they can continue to, cash those checks. Like he's written how many different,
I don't know. I don't know if, obviously we'd have to get George R. R. Martin on this podcast. And if he's listening, I would gladly, load him up on Zoom and talk to him. But, I obviously has other people he'd rather talk to probably than Talkin Thrones. But the fact is, I think once his work was sort of made into an HBO show, it became, a lot more broadly popular around the world. And I think that's what he's interested in feeding is this bigger entity. You know, sort of the television aspect of it became bigger than the book aspect, and you know, he's just sort of feeding that. He's you know, making Game of Thrones into something bigger than it was. And you know, so I don't necessarily fault the writer for doing that. I don't know if he, you know, greed has everything to do with it. It just might be. It's like, hey, I'm reaching more people in this medium, and people like this world, and I want to give them this world as best as I can. And the fact is, maybe the medium of television is a bigger audience for him to do so.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. There's only one more sequence here that I really want to cover. Aside from like I said, there's a couple of cool moments. You know, I think the scene where Grey Worm cuts the two Masters' throat. That's a pretty cool executed scene. You know,
yeah, definitely. It's like, you know, which one of you is going to be killed as a warning to everybody?
Yeah, and then
he's the outsider.
Yeah, it's like, and then they pull over the wool over them, and then they kill the other two, and it was pretty obvious. You know, it's funny because I recognized the one guy in the blue cape, and the one guy who obviously survived, but the third guy I didn't recognize that guy. I don't think he's been in the show before, but obviously, you know, we get one more moment in Meereen, which is the Greyjoys arriving and forging their alliance with them. You know, I only had one thing here that was a little bit confusing to me, which is where it's like, okay, so Tyrion is going after Theon for making a bunch of dwarf jokes, and it's like, I mean, I would have to go back and rewatch that episode from season 1. It felt so long ago, but I'm like, what wasn't it like Tyrion that was kind of so shamelessly going after Theon and just kind of mocking him for the Greyjoy rebellion? I'm like, I don't remember Theon making a bunch of dwarf jokes, you know. So that was a little bit that was a little bit confusing to me. But obviously, yeah.
If we had one of those like flashback segments of the podcast, this is like the Game of Thrones rewind, brought to you by whatever, you know,
brought to you by insert whatever sponsor. Here.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really remember that particular detail in season 1 either. Obviously, you know, sure. The whole point is that, you know, Theon is not the greatest person in the world, and I think at that point they're thinking that Theon is the, you know, heir to the Iron Isles. And it's when they say that no, Yara is the one that, you know, we're staking the claim behind. I think that's it's a little bit of like, you know, this is where the show kind of gets into the, you know, we're going to have all female rulers, and we're going to, you know, sort of, there's a little kind of play with that, you know, that all the power is in the
definitely.
hands of women.
This is definitely where kind of the girl power moment starts, especially considering next season what you have Daenerys, Yara, Ilaria, Olenna, Cersei, Sansa. To an extent, again, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
No, considering it's a medieval show and the time period is typically known to be male dominant, the fact is, you know, there have these strong women characters in this show, and you know, they're in positions of power. Now, the show itself is sort of winking at us, you know, making it clear that they're aware of this, which, you know, is kind of a little cheesy. But the fact is, you know, hey, they have generated some fantastic characters, and it doesn't really matter that, you know, or I don't think they need to tell us, you know, that they have these characters in great storylines. So it's very interesting that, you know, there is that kind of wink nod between Yara and Daenerys in this scene. I don't necessarily think it's necessary to be there, but you know, then again,
also
that's just
a
my
little bit of definitely a little bit of a hard sell, especially in hindsight when, you know, kind of Yara is the whole impetus for their alliance. Also is, so it's like a couple of different things where it's like, oh, you know, if we start granting independence to everyone, you know, kind of showing that obviously we know that Tyrion still has like a little bit of a personal stake, a vendetta against the Greyjoys, considering that they bombed Lannisport during their first invasion, you know, all those years ago when Theon was first originally captured and, you know, given away and made Ned Stark's ward. But he's like, oh, you know, if we start giving everyone independence, he's like, oh, she's not giving, she's asking for it. You know, I'm like, okay, there's a little bit of a distinction there where it's like, okay, so like the alliance is formed. I'm like, I think it's going to be a little bit of a hard sell for Yara to tell everyone just immediately, oh yeah, our entire way of life, reaving, raping, pillaging, all that's over with. All that's over with. I'm like, have you seen the Iron Islands? They're not exactly made for growing.
Yeah, they're not exactly the smartest folk in the world. But I think the fact is, the best part is we have a couple ships, you know, what was it? Like 100
ships. Yeah.
What's his name? Euron.
Yeah.
He's basically building a lot more ships, and he's going to come. But it comes with his offer of marriage. That's the polite way of putting it. Yara puts it differently.
Yeah.
But the fact is, it's like Daenerys is like, well, oh, you don't offer the same thing, and Yara's kind of like, well, I'm not going to demand.
Yeah.
I think that would have been
That
really
was pretty
funny.
good. That was pretty good. I'm like, hey, I would have seen that. I'm not gonna lie.
Hey,
Especially
listen,
since Yara seems to get it on with like every other attractive female in the show.
the show seems to be done with weddings, but
Yeah. Hey.
they could have had one right there and then and there.
Yeah.
Hey, whatever.
Whatever.
The fact is,
Times they are a changing.
the fact is, this is a cool alliance. Again, Daenerys, the queen, that we want to see how she shakes up Westeros. Yara, who I think is a fantastic character. I really like the fact that she, has been, went to rescue Theon, totally got denied. Kind of when he returns, she accepts him. Like there's something about her character and just the way that she carries herself that is just intriguing from start to finish when they first introduce her all the way up to the end. And the problem is they just don't have anything for the Iron Islands.
They just yeet her out of the show, and they have nothing for the Iron Islands to do.
Yeah, it's kind of like they become like C, maybe D bench players, in the next 2 seasons. So they're there, but they don't necessarily have the most big impact on events.
Right.
Which is a shame because it's a good actor, good character. I want to see more.
Right. As we know, the ultimate streamlining of streamlined things. So that's it. Let's be done with Meereen once and for all. We're only going to have to cover it for a little bit next week with our finale, that we can just be done with Meereen forever. Let's get to it. The title of the episode, the main centerpiece, the thing that we've all been waiting for.
Next week is when Daenerys talks to Dario, isn't it?
That's Daenerys talks to Dario and then grants Tyrion hand to the king for what I still have no idea. But
whatever the case may be, we'll find out when we watch it.
So Battle of the Bastards. Obviously, this was going to be big. Famously, it's funny because obviously Miguel Sapochnik, this is his next episode that he directed after Hardhome last season. But I don't. But this is kind of where mainstream audiences started to make the connection and where people really became familiar with his name. I believe I remember hearing his name first on the Schmoes Knows. I remember I was listening to them religiously back around circa 2015, 2016 when this was airing. And I mean, again, he's back with his DP Fabian Wagner. I've talked about that guy. He obviously shot the Snyder Cut. That guy has an amazing kind of visual aesthetic when it comes to presenting cinematography. And oh man, like I think before we get into like the specifics of the storyline and kind of how it plays out, because I surprisingly enough have come around on it, where despite the fact that I loved it from a technical level, I was a little bit critical of it after the fact in a way that I think not a lot of people were, because again, because the thing that's so prevalent about this episode is this is the show's, between this episode and next week's episode of The Winds of Winter, this was the show's apex. Even though we would still get like some crazy, awesome extravagant battles afterwards. I actually have a very controversial opinion about one of the battle sequences that we get next season. I think it was definitely a descent here. I feel like none of the crazy battle sequences that we got after the fact really had the impact that this battle had, because it felt like the most fully realized version of how action spectacle had evolved on the show. It started off back when the show was more of like a TV show. It was very minimalistic, almost like whenever we got a crazy action sequence like this, it would always be like such an earned treat, like Blackwater, and the way that it was like so well built up.
Season 1, Tyrion gets knocked out and we skipped the battle.
Right, so. Exactly. Like you said, it was a TV show. We had to clearly do some cut-arounds, but like this is where it's like, okay, they have all the toys, they have all the money, they have all the things at their disposal, and unlike the first 2 battle sequences, which were kind of like, based around strategy and based around, okay, how long can we, play off this battle and play off the actual fighting between armies and, rely on the kind of the structures that we're hidden behind. Nah, this is full on bare bone armies charging at each other. This is like pulling right from Braveheart. And I really think that it's crazy, because I think the thing that I keep coming back to about this battle is how claustrophobic they're able to make it. That continuously blows me away, and just how bloody this is. Like, I really think this is the bloodiest episode of the entire show, because even with the Long Night and the Bells, there's not, with the Bells, there's not a lot of close-ups of the battle, because again, there's not a lot of close-ups of, people getting stabbed. And the majority of death happens through dragonfire. And with the long night, it's so goddamn dark throughout the entire thing that you can barely see what's going on. And then when you do see people die, it's like it's White Walker action, so it's quick blink and you'll move on. The thing that's so impressive about the editing and how it's shot here is that literally there are moments where when Jon Snow is underneath that massive horde of bodies as they are just piling on top of each other, on top of each other, on top of each other, you legitimately feel the breath leaving your body. Like the first time I watch it, I'm like, oh my God, I cannot breathe here,
Well, yeah, the claustrophobic nature of him being buried on the dead bodies, it's like he's just drowning in death. And I think that's a great visual metaphor for, what this battle's about. It's like we need to secure the North, rally together around one banner, and then turn around and fight the army of the dead. But, at the end of the day, he has to kind of go through this process of being baptized in the dead of his own army to really come out of it and be able to lead the charge against the Night King.
Right, exactly. And the other thing too, as well, is that it's kind of in a strange way, like the amount of blood that's in this episode. Like I think it tops like the Red Wedding. Like obviously, I feel like the Red Wedding was probably like previously the most bloodiest that we saw, but it's like we never saw this much like gore and blood in front of us. We have people like ripping each other's like necks out, and like every time somebody gets stabbed, like you really like see the blood.
You're talking about
like,
Tormund
oh, absolutely.
When he bites. Is that a Karstark?
No, it's that Small John Umber. I actually have a couple notes here about him.
Yeah. Okay, so that was really great. I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
Like the fact that Tormund is sort of being beaten up and he's in close quarters with Umber, and then all of a sudden, like I think isn't this when the Knights of the Vale are coming in?
It's like right, but yeah, it's
like we hear the horn
blow. Yeah, they hear the horn,
and that
blowing,
distracts Umber, and then Tormund just like takes a big
because Umber
bite out of
somehow
crime, so to
has a
speak.
leg up on Tormund for whatever strange reason. I don't know how. And now I'm understanding why they made Umber look the way that he does. He's supposed to be a visual parallel to Tormund. So
yeah, I think the main thing is, obviously they took that Greek phalanx sort of style of fighting to surround them and to pressure them in. They're backed up against a mound of bodies. Tormund, for a second, sees an opportunity to sort of, potentially get out, right? And that is through taking the smaller force that's coming over the bodies and kind of climbing their way out. So it's almost like a move of desperation. I also believe Tormund just got hit and injured by the one of the phalanx spears.
Right.
And so, they're running, they're trying to get him out of there. He might sort of be nursing that injury a little bit, and then Umber kind of, gets the upper hand when they're fighting. And the pressure is squeezing them in. It's close quarters, and then, like I said, he just chomps really that bite out of crime out of his neck. And it's like, I don't even know what he does. Does he like spit the piece away
or whatever? It's out like it's doing like kind of one of those cheesy like blood spurt things, that you see happen a little bit frequently. It's cheesy. But let's talk about the actual like events leading up to the battle, because I've got a couple notes here. So as far as like kind of getting into it, so I guess kind of why I was a little bit critical of the battle at first is because I feel like the first time I saw it, it was probably the first time that it the thing that I had previously said about it is I'm like, this is the first time I've ever seen a Game of Thrones battle where the emphasis is on the spectacle over the story. Because at the end of the day, as crazily claustrophobic, as bloody as as much as they play around with the filmmaking techniques, playing around with the rule of threes in order to surprise you, where it's like, when Ramsay is shooting the arrows at Rickon, you see the 3 hours land, and everything cuts out, and it's like right as Jon's about to get him, the one arrow penetrates him, somehow it like pierces him from like up below, even though Ramsay shoot. I don't know. I'm not gonna get into the nitpicks of the logistics of how they shoot it versus what it actually is, but so how they're using all that.
If we're gonna do a nitpick about Rickon and the arrows, is they tell him to run. And you have all these
running straight forward and not dodging side to side.
First of all, you have these flayed bodies. Like, literally they show him one of the shot. He's run past all 5 of these pyres.
Right.
Like all he had to do is run to like one of the furthest pyres and hide behind it.
Right.
No arrow was going to hit him. He would definitely have probably like a 50% higher chance of surviving if he just went and hid behind one of these burning bodies.
Well, nobody ever accused Rickon Stark of being very smart, you know.
I guess, but
the last time we saw him, it was just like, you know, he's just a dumb little kid who just needed to be protected.
Yeah, listen, you know, the actor definitely looks like Andre the Giant, you know, like compared to what he looked like in earlier
Well,
seasons.
yeah, it's been 3 years.
Like,
he grew.
Yeah, he grew. They should have just recasted it as like a young kid because,
Yeah.
you know, obviously then you would argue recasting Bran because, you know, he grew just as much.
Because Bran went from being like what age, like probably like 13 that he was when he was originally on the show to like all of a sudden being magically 20. You know, it's crazy how fast these kids grow. But so
anyway, it's one of those things where I nitpick on it because I understand the psychology of the battle and what Ramsay is doing by sort of, you know, letting Rickon go and then sort of torturing Jon by missing. And then obviously at the last possible moment, that's when Ramsay's going to pull, you know, Rickon away from him. And this is exactly what Sansa says in the beginning. Right. Like she knows Ramsay.
Real quick,
right?
To bring it back to my point before. What I was saying is that what I was critical of is the fact that I'm like, it's still predictable. I'm like, there's no sense of me going into that episode, no matter what they throw at these guys, that they're not going to lose, you know? And the whole thing is that they're building up to it the entire first half of the battle, you know, is it's like Jon has this kind of feeling on his back that they're not going to make it out, you know? You kind of almost maybe get the sense that he wants to die, you know? And in a sense, he does get his wish in the metaphorical sense, you know? He tells Melisandre to not bring him back if they lose, you know? Davos and Tormund obviously have all the faith in the world in him, but he clearly does not have it all faith, you know? Sansa is second guessing him at every single turn, but there was never any sense that I had that they were not going to win this, you know? And so that's what I was critical of at first. But what I'll say now, after having rewatched it for probably I think this is either like my 5th or 6th time having watched this episode, the biggest thing that I can say is even though I still may have a problem with the predictability of it, I will say that, like, from a storytelling standpoint, masterfully built up. You know, how they build up the sense of, you know, Jon does not ultimately know what he's getting into. You know, Jon is very cocky. You know, he whether he actually is or not, or whether he's just playing face. You know, he is very much going into this fight thinking that they are going to have the upper hand, you know, thinking that he will be able to trick Ramsay and lure him into this confrontation and then kind of box him out on all sides. And how ultimately that's what Ramsay ends up doing, you know, how in their initial meeting with Ramsay,
ultimately the psychology of this sequence is Jon talking with Davos and they have this plan, right? You know, we're not going to charge, you know, we're going to let them charge. Then when they come in, we're going to surround them. And then we're going to basically take them out. So they have this whole game plan, and Sansa's just sitting there like listening. And after the meeting, she goes, you know, oh, you're talking all your strategies and all this, but have you ever thought once that you don't know this man? And she really goes after him and like says, maybe you should have asked me. Although
I have a little bit of a problem with that because she was
literally sitting right there.
I don't know anything about battle strategy. It's like, what are you talking about then?
Okay, but it's kind of like she is wishy-washy in this sequence, but she was also just literally sitting in the meeting, and I'm pretty sure she could have spoke up. Like, no one was going to say...
Yeah, no one was going to talk down to her.
Yeah,
you know?
This is not a place for you. Like, no, like, Sansa, in the little time that she's been with this group, has earned her place, and she could have easily, you know, asked questions. She could have brought up specific points. She could have even brought up the fact that she knows Ramsay Bolton, and guess what? Davos is not an idiot. You know, like he would probably say that's, you know, makes total sense. You know the psychology. Like I can't imagine a world where Davos doesn't listen to her.
Right.
So it's one of those things where there's a little weirdness going on in this the way Sansa's written in this scene. But I think the fact is she's right. You know, she does know Ramsay.
At the end of the day, she's validated because she is right. But I have a couple problems with Sansa in this episode.
The advice that she gives in this sequence is that, you know, you think you're laying the traps, but he's the one that's always, you know, got you trapped. And I think the beauty of this whole entire episode is the fact that we listen to Jon, Davos, and the gang sort of game plan. And then as we see this battle unfold, everything they talked about wanting to do to Ramsay is exactly what Ramsay does to them.
Exactly.
Starting with Rickon, you know, going to the Greek phalanx, surrounding them and sort of pressuring them and taking them out. Everything is exactly the way that Sansa put it. And that's why at the end of the day, when we hear those horns and obviously the Knights of the Vale come in, Sansa has proven herself the victor of the Battle of the Bastards.
Right.
She is ultimately better than Ramsay. She is better than Jon, at least in this moment.
Right, which is a little bit disappointing because as far as that goes, because it's like Jon obviously, is clearly a little bit overconfident, but like he's not a fool, So that's kind of why I'm not gonna say it wasn't well written,
I
but
don't know
it's
if
like I always
overconfident is the way I would put it in this particular episode, because his main thing is just like, we have no other opportunity. We either attack now or we lose the chance to.
Right, exactly. And like I said, it's kind of still goes in line with this idea of it's like, okay, does Jon want to die in this sequence? Going back to the Melisandre sequence. I have a little bit of a problem with Melisandre as well, but she's like, I don't know how I brought you back. That was just the Lord speaking with me. And it's like, oh, okay. And we're still doing this, really? Like, at this point, you have to understand that you are capable of some sorcery, It's like...
Yeah, pop quiz, Dom, or pop quiz hot shot, right, to make a speed reference.
Yes.
Is the only reason Melisandre is in this episode is so when Davos finds the wooden horse,
oh, absolutely,
he can kind of just snarl at her.
100%. That's the only reason why, because she has no reason to be in this episode at all. Where she's like, "Oh, you have a small part to play in the Lord's plan. Whether maybe the plan is for you to die again tomorrow." And I'm like, "Well, that would how crazy would that have been if Jon had died in that action sequence? But no, literally they go out of their way to show him like once the actual charge happens, once the two armies clash right in the middle of him, how he's magically able to like dodge and duck and weave around, like arrows coming at him, guys charging at him. You see like one shot of like a guy riding still on his horse, missing his head. All of that.
Oh yeah, listen. I think everything to do with Jon in the battle sequence is awesome, except for the opening shot where he's like throws his belt aside and he has the sword. And
oh really? You're not a fan of that shot?
It's awesome until the moment where they literally have the cavalry rush past him and just defeat the whole purpose of that shot.
Yeah.
It's like it's
a little bit of subversion just for subversion's sake, eh?
Yeah, to me, it's a moment where it's like, yeah, Jon is our hero. This guy is the man, in the show. Like, he's the hero. He's going to take on this whole army. And yes, it kind of makes sense that the cavalry would clash and whatever, but he should have took one guy out, and then everyone should have clashed around him. It was really weird to me that they subverted me and just like he's confused.
Yeah.
It kind of like that shot is really to get you amped up for the sequence, and then it pulls you out of it just for a moment.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So now let's talk about Sansa in this episode, because here's the thing. It's so confusing to talk about it because, again, she brings up mostly legitimate points. But the constant thing that frustrates me in hindsight is how she seems to be going out of her way to work against Jon, where she's the one who convinced him to put this whole thing together. And now she immediately just thinks that he's not going to pull it off. So it led to her writing the letter to Littlefinger. Obviously, but which is kind of confusing timeline wise, because she writes that letter to Littlefinger before she finds out from Brienne, obviously from the previous episode, that they're not going to have the Tully army. So at that point, when she's writing the letter, there's still a chance that they have, as far as actually winning. Because if they had the Tully army, she wouldn't have needed to rely on Littlefinger or the Knights of the Vale. So that's one problem. Number two is the fact that it's like, okay, they're clearly trying to state that she is the new Littlefinger to the point where she doesn't trust anybody and she's only out for herself. But that, to me, is a little bit of character portrayal, because Sansa, at the end of the day, yes, while she has been marred and scarred by just the various traumatic incidents that she's had to go through, she should still at the very least trust her family members and trust Jon. There's the whole point why they were going to the wall in the first place. So it's like this whole idea of not telling Jon that the Knights of the Vale were on their way. That doesn't make sense from any logistical standpoint.
Well, I think to a certain degree, I think the whole she doesn't trust him angle, that is kind of weird, and it definitely is apparent. I think that's probably if they just kind of drop that and they made it where she just has an ace up her sleeve. She doesn't have to tell Jon that the Knights of the Vale are coming, because also if you think about it, how does she know that Littlefinger will actually oblige?
Right.
Littlefinger has said that he plays games, and does try to, he is basically all about himself, and so there's no guarantee that after Sansa sends that Raven, that Littlefinger will actually oblige. So if she were to tell Jon, hey, the Knights of the Vale are coming, and they were to shift their game plan, and then the Knights never came, that could be devastating. So, I think that what really should have been shown is Sansa not necessarily trusting herself and her kind of overcoming it. And at the end of the day, her decisions that she was very skeptical about and scared to tell Jon, like it should have been like, she made all the right moves, but there's a little anxiety because
Right.
she's playing with people's lives for the first time.
Right.
And that would have been a much more interesting storyline
essentially her
than
first
setting
major
up this weird clash with Jon.
Right. It's essentially setting her up as the leader, as the new leader of Winterfell, which again is very clearly what they are building her towards. Like I said, as problematic as that is, I do think the decision to eventually build Sansa towards becoming the new ruler of Winterfell, I think is actually kind of ingenious. I honestly, I'm still baffled by the fact that Benioff and Weiss could come up with something that interesting. But you're right. It's not necessarily with the decision making. It has to do with the fact that it's kind of portrayed incorrectly. Where you're right, this is Sansa's first major decision as a leader. This is the first time where she is gambling with people's lives, and so she should be necessarily nervous about the fact that she's not telling Jon because she doesn't want him to have this false sense of hope if the Knights of the Vale never show up, because this is still Littlefinger we're talking about. But unfortunately we get it how we get it. The Knights of the Vale show up, they take it out. Like I said, the action set piece is awesome. Tormund gets the one on Small John Umber, kills him. They see Ramsay retreating. I love that cool little wide shot where it shows Jon, Tormund, and the Giant all running towards Winterfell. I just think that's pretty cool. It's a little bit cartoonish in hindsight.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with you. It's cartoonish, but it needs to be there because it is definitely awesome. Like your blood is pumping. You're like, get him.
Yeah, you're like, let's go.
At that point,
it's like it's just complete.
You're ready for it.
It's complete fan service, but it's completely earned. Where again, Ramsay still thinks that they've got a shot because they've got Winterfell. And it's like, okay, did you forget that they have a giant? It's like, and so the giant clearly,
that's the saddest part of this episode is
it's watching that giant go down, man. But pour one out for one Weg Wondar one, the last of the living giants, before they're randomly inexplicable giants in the night.
And then it's literally Ramsay's last dirty deed, is basically shooting him in the eye and taking him out, and he's like, what?
You didn't think I wasn't going to? And then of course, surrounded on all sides, completely losing, even down to the point where he knows that he's lost everything. He still is being an overconfident, cocky little shit where he's shooting arrows right at Jon. Why nobody thinks to shoot an arrow at this guy in order to stop him, I don't know. But I'm assuming again it's to give Jon the victory,
My favorite part is just, you mentioned something about singles combat.
I've decided to take you up on your offer.
Yeah, I've reconsidered. That's such a great line. Like,
filling it all the way to the end. Like, that guy is a true professional.
Like, I think, this is the role of a lifetime to play Ramsay Bolton, because you just have to be the most despicable person in the world, but at the same time,
and the most disturbing person. Don't forget that.
Yeah, but you have to come up with clever ways of delivering it, because it just definitely could have been portrayed many different ways, but just the clear fun that he's having with this character and obnoxious that he's making him and everything is just, it just really is what elevates this to one of the best characters of the show, really to the very end.
Yep, all the way to the very bitter end, right when Jon punches, knocks him out and then punches him. So satisfying on so many different levels. You feel yourself in Jon's skin there. You're like, yeah, Jon, get him,
Can I ask you a question? Do you think, as he's punching Ramsay Bolton, he sees Ollie's face there? This is for Ingrid.
Like, this is for Ingrid. Maybe. That's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I'm not quite sure, but hey,
probably not. I'm just trying to bring Ollie's memory back.
Man. I thought we'd finally put him to bed. It's like finally one kid who led nothing but a troubled life. He's finally, in peace. I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's such a kind of important character that existed. I guess.
I guess. Who knows? But anyways, but that brings us to the final shot, the final sequence of the episode. Again, it was so fan beloved. It's like, okay, it was so great finally seeing, the ultimate poetry of Ramsay, who was nothing but a mad dog, who had literally been called by a mad dog by his father earlier that season before he killed him, being eaten by his very hounds that he had set upon so many different people. The poetry of that sequence is amazing as it is. But you brought up a very interesting point to me in the lobby last week that you thought was probably the biggest flaw of this episode. And I think that in hindsight, after seeing it, I kind of do agree with you, because again, it's another fan service insert that doesn't necessarily benefit the characters of the show. So tell the Talking TV audience what that was.
Yeah, Dom, it gets me every time I watch this episode. And, if you're putting in, what is this, 60 plus episodes or whatever.
Yeah,
it is,
well, it's
we're
literally
close to
episode
60.
59, close to 60.
Yeah, exactly. So we're basically almost 60 episodes in. And, it's like you watch the whole series and you get to this point and you're like, oh man, here it is. And then at the end of the episode, she's there. She's sort of watching Ramsay. It's almost like the whole idea that what he says is, I'll always be a part of you. And then she's watching him being flayed by the dogs, and she's
Did
cold.
they flay him? I thought they just were just like taking a bite out of him and eating him.
There's a shot with all his
there's a
skin
shot
off
of his
his
hand
fingers.
again. His fingers just covered in blood. It's like the blood is just dripping out. Like I said,
is the skin even there? I think the skin.
The skin
Oh,
is
really?
there. It's so covered in blood because the dog is like literally chewing on his face off.
To me, I when I watched it, I basically thought there were like bones. That one of the dogs kind of like scraped a lot of the skin away. Which I guess, would have been maybe I just viewed it more gruesome than it is. But the fact is she's cold and watching this, and she orchestrated this because,
Right.
the scene before she was like, where is he?
Right.
And so, that she wanted to be the one to torture him in this manner.
She was going to be the one to end him and torture him,
And then, obviously, he's gone. He's bit in the face. The dogs are having their dinner after 7 days of being starved. And she turns away and walks towards the camera. And in a moment, which is only to really mimic the audience's release of like, yeah, after so many seasons, Ramsay finally got his, she smirks and smiles. And, that smirk and smile just really ruins it for me, because I feel like after everything she's been through, all the trauma, the fact that she went out of her way to set him up to be eaten by his own dogs, I just feel like that's a cold decision. And she's a strong leader at this point. This is sort of, the moment where she takes charge and she has a impact, and she makes this decision. She, this is a cruelty that is justified and is meant to say, if you were like someone like Ramsay, you're going to get tortured like this. Well, maybe not torture, but you're going to get your comeuppance. And so this is like a good move of strong leadership. And to me, the smirk is just like she's a child, and it's like she's, I see her as she turns around, she walks away, she just keeps a straight face. That is a strong leader. She turns around, she walks towards the camera, she smirks. I just feel like she's still a child. And you can argue it differently. Probably other people disagree with me, but ultimately, I just think that small, subtle difference of who the character is. I prefer her to remain cold, just walk away from it, and move on to the next thing that she has to do. It's just another thing that happened that she had to take care of. It's one chore scratched off the list. She's now ruling Winterfell. She has to move on to the other thing. Instead, we get this fan service thing where it's like, we, the audience, are kind of like, yeah, we're happy. We finally, he got his. And she smiles for us on camera. And I don't necessarily think that is necessary. I think it would have been better to choose the character moment and just have her walk off coldly.
I agree. Yeah, like I've said before, season 6 is definitely the beginning of many, many kind of fan service inserts that don't necessarily benefit the stories. We'll have to put that in the poll on Spotify. Sans a smile at the end. Fan service or warranted? I'll leave it up to the audience to see whether they agree with you or not, because I feel like that'll be definitely a case-by-case basis depending on who you're talking to. But that's it. We did it. That is the Battle of the Bastards. And with that, we have one more episode. It's kind of insane. This is the first time ever where I'll let you guys in on a little bit of a, behind the scenes secret. Pat and I were recording these a bunch in advance. We were recording 2 episodes per week. So a lot of these episodes will be released months after they were initially released. But man, season 6, it was the fastest season that we covered yet, but man, was it intense. It was action packed from start to finish. We have one episode left. Like I said, the Battle of the Bastards, as crazy and as awesome and as epic as this episode was, it is really just the beginning of the 1-2 punch that is wrapped up next week with Winds of Winter. We got Daenerys. We saw Daenerys finally achieve her victory. We saw Jon and Sansa achieve their victory, and now we're going to see Cersei achieve their victory in the next episode for the season 6 finale. Arguably, some people say one of, if not the best episode of the entire show, the Winds of Winter. We will see you guys next week. It's going to be a lot of fun, and after that, it's the final 13.
Man, I'm just saying that the best part about the next week's episode is the good stuff happens in the opening.
Yes.
So when I fire it up, it's right to the action, right to the point.
Right to
I'm
it.
so excited to get to it. If you're done listening to this, well, just go ahead and fire up that next episode. Get straight to that Winds of Winter action.
100%. And like I said, you can continue. Like I said, we're very, very close to the end. After next week's episode, Winds of Winter, we're only going to have 13 episodes left of Talkin Thrones. Thanks, everyone that has been a part of this journey with us so far since we started way back when in April of last year. I know there's been a lot of changes in the format since we started, but it's been so much fun recapping the show. I know I'm talking like this is the last episode, but, I got to include these every little bit, especially once we get a big special one like this. Pat, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Hey, listen, I'm posting stuff on Instagram again, so at Patrick W. Huber, Instagram, you can find my stuff there.
And if you can follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews, be sure to follow the official Talkin TV podcast, Instagram and Facebook. Follow us across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, all of the above. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. We'll see you guys next week for Winds of Winter. And as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film. And watch more fucking movies.
Eat more custard, man.
Eat more custard. Take care, guys.